You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rhoda and other panelists and our audience. I think I want to welcome us to this all-important meeting. And as you have said, the focus of the meeting is innovative solutions for climate resilient water resource management. And I think we have tried to assemble the right people to address these issues. And I think their approval will be read soon to justify that they are qualified to discuss this. And we think with our effort, we will be able to address sustainable development goal, Cs, that is on water, and as well as that of the climate change. Definitely, climate change affects water access. So that we will not waste much time, we leave that to the expertise to discuss this. So, and I want to say, HACEY partnering with our center, I think is something that is commendable, and we want to see more of this. So I want to thank all of you for coming. So congratulations to be part of this important event. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Professor Olatunji, for being so succinct with your address, and so that we can move on to the main discussion for today, which is the panel discussion, where our experts will be taking us through innovations and thought processes for water resource management and climate change. So I'll be introducing our three experts today who will be engaging us in this discussion. First, I'd like to introduce Professor Folaranmi Babalola, who is a professor of forest economics and management and the head of the Department of Forest Resource Management at the University of Ilorin. He is the founder of the Save Sahara Network, an NGO dedicated to nature conservation and grassroots empowerment, securing international funding for youth initiatives in biodiversity, conservation, and climate change mitigation. He has consulted for organizations such as the FAO and Africa Forest Forum. His works advance sustainable forest management, environmental protection, and community well-being. Thank you for joining us, Professor Babalola.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So next I'll introduce Professor Mohamed Saka, who is a distinguished public health specialist with over 25 years of experience in health systems management, research, and program implementation. As the Director of Laboratory to Product and National Intellectual Property Technology Transfer Officer, he has championed innovation in health and sustainable development. He has contributed to developing strategic health plans, including Nigeria's National Health Development Plan, and has managed numerous global health projects funded by USAID, DFID, and the World Bank, and the Global Fund. Professor Mohamed Saka, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. So last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Abiola Oshuniyi, who is a tri-sector innovator, sustainability-focused impact professional, and strategist with over 15 years experience spanning financial service, healthcare, international development, governance, sustainability, and strategy consulting. Abiola is passionate about advancing public health systems, sustainability initiatives, and social development across Africa. He has led numerous initiatives aimed at maximizing resource impact, promoting digital health transformation, and fostering health system resilience. In addition to his professional achievements, which include currently serving as the technical advisor to NASID, NASENI, Global Fund, and NCDC, and including the Bill and Melinda Gates funded, child-led, digitally enabled PhD project. Abiola is passionate about mentoring the next generation of innovators and is also a fellow of the Institute of Humanitarian Studies and a fellow of the Academy of Public Health. Thank you for joining us, Abiola.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be amongst these distinguished senior colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll kick off right away. So for us opening, and we all know and understand how much climate change has affected every aspect of our lives, from environment to health to economy, and to generally how we preserve and maintain and manage our natural resources. And one of such natural resources is water. Potable water, usable water is scarce currently because of the different changes in climate change, and understanding how the effects of climate change causes these negative impacts in society is something that we need to consider and plan for in our development plans. So to start off with, one of the key things that we actually have to understand is what exactly is water resource management, especially in this resource-strained environment. That how can we better understand what it is so that we can better understand how to address it? So I would like each of our panelists to take a stab at this, and then we will go fully into the discussion for today. So I'd like to start off with Professor Saka. So please shed a bit more light on what water resource management is.
Yes, thank you very much, you and other members of the panelists. And I believe I'm audible enough to hear.
Yes, you are.
Can hear my voice loud?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you. Yes, as introductory of water resource management. Water resource, you know that water is life and water is everywhere. And water is like more than 75% of our body needs, and then more than 75% of total body population. But water resource management itself has to do with planning, it has to do with implementation, production, design of the utilization of water. So for instance, in Nigeria now, water resource management is domain at Federal Ministry of Water Resources. And then water resources management is also involved, apart from Federal Ministry of Health, it's a multi-layer thing, Federal Ministry, State Ministry, and then the local government level. So like at federal level now, the Federal Ministry is in charge of management of water resources with agencies involved. Like we have like 11 or 9 water river basins in Nigeria that are in charge of water resource management. So all these resource management involve not only the institution involved, the structure involved, and then of course the incentive, and then the people that are the expert that are also involved in water resource management. So Nigeria dedicatedly water resource management. Nigeria has been enshrined in our policy, and then also the act that also established water resources mainly just for what production of fresh water that will be used at domestic level and industry. Just in a nutshell, water resources has to do with production, and then of course implementation, and then of course institutional in place for utilization of adequate water in terms of quality and quantity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And as you said, the one key point of what you said is that it is multi-layered and is multi-sectoral. It happens at both from different ministries, different people being in charge of it, as well as at different levels of decision making. Professor Babalola.
Oh, thank you so much once again for having me here. And I'm glad that we are having this discussion today among the professionals in different disciplines, cutting across forestry, environment, and health, and glad to be part of the discussion. Now, I'm a specialist in forestry, and discussing this topic today is one of those central parts of my discipline. It has to do with management and utilization of forest resources. Now, no doubt, water is part of what is sustaining us in forestry. In addition to what the first speaker have said, in addition to sustaining us as human beings, water sustains our trees. And trees contribute to water management, and our forests contribute to the discharge, quality of water, the availability of water, and even the quantity of water. So when we're talking about water resources management and forestry, we are talking about understanding and optimizing the interactions between forests and water cycles, ensure that we have available water, we have quality water, and sustainably used water. So when we have forests, when we have trees in our environment, we know collection of trees is forest, so I'm using the word interchangeably. Both forests and trees contribute to quantity, quality, and sustainability of water that is available. That is in a short, in a nutshell, what we mean by water resource management. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. And you have said it so well. You cannot really separate the importance of the forest from the importance of water management, because they play a key role in the production of water, the purification of water, and access to water as well. Thank you so much, sir. Abiola?
I would just take a stab at this from a public health and sustainability point of view. First off, water resource management is primarily fundamental because water is essential to human health, and human life, exactly as Professor Saka has mentioned. I like the way Professor Babalola talked about forestry, but it's connected directly to food production and economic stability. Just for sake of conversation, according to the UN Water Development Report, by 2025, 2/3 of the world's population could potentially face water shortages, which underscores the importance of how, managing the water resources that we have right now should be done sustainably. Effective water management ensures equitable and efficient water distribution across all sectors. There's really no sector that we think about today that does not have some significant use of water, and whether for manufacturing, whether for even ease of certain aspects of life. So if you think about the financial services industry, there's no building you have today as utility. Water is a part of that process. And just for reference, just to narrow it down, in agriculture, water production or water accounts for about 70% of the global water withdrawals. Without water, you can't have agriculture fundamentally. And the inefficient, irrigation practices result in significant waste. And when you begin to think about it, some of that waste affects how the water cycles are and water availability in certain areas of life. And areas where, in the area where I, usually play a lot, which is the public health, improper water management contributes to over 80% of diseases in developing countries, with diarrhea alone causing about, approximately between 1.6 to 1.8 million deaths annually. And we all know that diarrhea is basically connected to water management and wastewater management. Cholera, for instance, is also connected to water supply management, quality water supply availability. Furthermore, hydropower and energy production depends directly on water availability. Disruption in that supply essentially affects, energy production and impact economic growth. So interestingly, we're speaking to quite a number of professors on this panel that are around the Kwara area. And, the Kanji Dam is not so far. I remember years ago where you would hear that because the Kanji is low, the power supply becomes disruptive. So it tells you how important, even from a production point of view, in terms of energy, how water is very important. Ultimately, water impacts everyone from urban population to rural farmers, and understanding that it's a core focus of sustainable development and climate adaptation makes it, when you begin to think about, water resource management, it is, not just a one-size-fits-all strategy. You need to think about the context. You need to think about the people. You need to think about the approaches that are, both acceptable in the context where you're working in, and ensuring that that is more of efficient, sustainable, and low cost, as it were, in that environment. Let me just stop here and pass it over to you, Reda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abiola, and you've really helped us launch this discussion, especially with mentioning the direct impact that climate change and water has to public health. And this would bring me to my first question to Professor Saka. Can you please tell us how the stress that climate change places on water access and quality directly impacts public health? As Abiola had said, there's been a rise in waterborne diseases such as diarrhea and such. And how do you see this trend when you think about access to water, especially within the climate change discussion, especially for vulnerable populations?
Okay, thank you very much. From resource management and then from effect of the climatic changes. Climatic changes actually has affected fresh water supply. Hello? Okay.
We can hear you, sir.
So climatic changes can you hear me? Okay. Has actually affected supply of fresh water in terms of quantity and quality. So if we public health perspective look at the effect of this, we look at it, okay, it's affected the supply of the water in terms of the quantity, for instance, now, and the water has to do with where in the community where they don't have access to fresh water, then people start to have issues with scabies, skin diseases. Where they don't have also access to good quality water, they have access to waterborne diseases, typhoid and schistosomiasis diseases. And I'll give you the typical example in Kwara State, like in the one local government in Kwara State, where because of low water, poor supply of water, and then there's a agency that was we tried to supply them with water, borehole water, installation of borehole. And in this process, we had the community to be taking this water because they have a poor water supply. And unfortunately, the one community, the borehole was installed in between the community and community people. And unfortunately, the water supply, the borehole was installed in a community that's very close. And they took this water, but unfortunately, the other community did not take this water because why? What we call behavioral change did not actually take place. So therefore, the community also are flooded with what we call guinea worm and schistosomiasis diseases. Because of the poor water supply in the country, it also affected what we call organic and inorganic also consumption by human beings. So people that have had the issue with lead poison, mercury poison, and the lot of we have now from the consumption of organic material. Because majority of the cancer cases we have now is because of poor consumption of poor water supply. Consumption of poor water supply. Okay, so also other aspects of water-related diseases we have in the country is the same thing because of climatic changes that have affected into the quality and quantity of water supply. The water is no more readily available. Unfortunately for us, populations are growing, more especially in this rural area. That's where there's no access to water. So it affected the consumption pattern, even agriculture. That was why WHO put it in the recent release by WHO that by the year 2020 to 2025, 230 to 250, that there will be going to be more. The rate of there will be like 250,000 naira per annum. From what is it? From malnutrition, from other diseases. And this is very explanatory because the fresh water is no more. Therefore, there will be a lot of malnourished children because they will be able to prepare what is necessary for consumption. So the same thing World Bank also talked about the effect of climatic changes on the freshwater supply. So we can look at it on and on, from layman, from infants to adolescent to the adult, and then to also the villagers, and then of course the vulnerable people. The climatic changes are certainly affect the issue of freshwater supply, and then invariably also affect the public health aspect of the population, and then the well-being of the people that's greatly also impactedly affected. Let me just put it as a summary now, and then maybe hear from other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. And you have rightly said, it's crucial that we understand how these linkages affect other aspects of life as well. from water scarcity leading to affecting agricultural production to it affecting the spread of disease, and how behavioral change in itself can also contribute to the impacts of water scarcity and access to safe potable water in local communities, especially for communities in the rural and hard to reach areas where even the access to this is already a problem, and then it's now exacerbated by the influence of climate change. Thank you so much, sir. And this has led me to my question for you, Professor Babalola. And Professor Saka had talked about this different linkages between climate change and water scarcity and other aspects of public health and diseases within communities. Now, could you elaborate more on the critical linkages between sustainable forest management and water security, and what strategies can be implemented to actually mitigate climate-induced threats such as droughts and floods that we have been seeing so far, especially in most at-risk areas?
Okay, thank you very much once again for this platform and for saying this thing that we're talking about. At least currently,
Sorry, sir, we can hardly hear you. Could you adjust your audio?
All right. Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. So I said once again I appreciate your invitation and for putting in a discussion the role of forests and the role of trees in water security and in water management. From our elementary science or elementary biology, we can understand what, even geography, from our elementary geography, I'm coming at the point of an environmentalist and ecosystem professional. Let's first look at water production before we look at the water utilization and every other thing. Forests and trees contribute. If we all remember water cycle, in the process of water cycle, we have trees in the equation. Where trees contribute to, if you look at the simple photosynthesis, the process of manufacturing of food, manufacturing of food and fiber and every other thing that we consume, water is given up as water vapor. And this contributes to the rainfall and all these water precipitation that we have in our environment. So what trees play a very critical role in our water production, and whether it is on the stream, natural water, or the rainwater harvest that we all the water from the rain that we harvest and utilize in our domestic homes. Now, when we're looking at all these processes, if we refuse to manage our forest very well, definitely there will be impact in the water supply, in the water that we have, whether we use it industrially or we use it at home or we use it in agriculture, or we use it in our health and individually. So directly, what are the different linkages between now the forests that I'm here to speak about and this water security that we're talking about? Okay. When let me first look at the term you use, sustainably managed forest. When we're talking about sustainable managed forest, we are not saying forest should not be cut. Before, people practice what we call absolute protection or absolute conservation of forest. But these days, because of population rise and because we need infrastructure, we need land, we definitely will clear forest. But when we're clearing forest, what do we put in place? Do we put in place process of restoring or replacing the forest that we've lost? Sustainable managed forest is about talking about using forest for today and taking care of tomorrow. All right. So when we use the forest for today, we take care of tomorrow. Because we can't exhaust everything today. So in the process of managing the forest, we look at the future and we make sure that we have forest still available for the future. Now, when we have the forest, what significant role will it play? Forest really enhance water security and maintain healthy watershed. What I mean by watershed? Those vegetation, those trees that we have along the water course, along the riverside, those are what we call watershed. They have their role. Okay? In the root of these trees, they help us in what we call water purification. water coming from on land in form of maybe erosion or in the form of flood. Trees along the water course tends to prevent impurities, tends to filter the water and help us to get good quality water in our streams, in our river that we eventually consume. Now, also they prevent what we call erosion and prevent soil siltation. This thing we call soil siltation, that means soil filling up water course and prevent water availability. All right. Another thing is that when we have good vegetation, it's going to regulate the water flow. Okay, when we regulate the water flow, it makes available water that we need for our domestic or industrial utilization. That's another thing. Now, when we have forest again and vegetation, it helps us to improve what we call groundwater discharge. That means the rate at which the ground, the soil discharge water that we use. So, tree plays significant role in water management, in water availability, and quality of water that we have in our environment. Okay. Now, another thing I want to quickly look at: how do we now manage this forest? How do we make forests available? Okay, we have different processes. We have what we call forest afforestation, land afforestation. We have land reforestation, and again, we have what we call integrated watershed management. What do I mean by afforestation? Afforestation is planting trees where it seems not existing for a long period of time. But reforestation is trees are there, you fell it up and utilize the tree, you need to plant them back. And the last one, integrated watershed management, management of all this vegetation, the trees along the water course. Example, we have what this thing they call mangrove. A number of us know what they call mangrove. Mangrove is this type of special trees and are along oceans. This salt water, ordinary trees can grow along that location. So we need to manage this mangrove along this ocean in order to prevent all these natural phenomena like hurricane, like all this flooding along the coastal area and what have you. So if we don't manage our forests appropriately, definitely we're going to have impact on our water availability, impact on the quality of water that we have, and also access to water that we have along our coastal area. So let me stop from there and we'll come back for that. Thank you so much. You are muted.
Thank you so much, sir. You've put a very good clarity on it, because I remember when we were young and we'll go to the village, the waters from the stream always tasted better than what I remember drinking from home. And now I know that the trees along that bank actually had that purification system. So you learn something new every day, no matter how old you get. So thank you very much. And I think this is something that we all need to know. We all need to understand the importance of having this and how they are related to each other. Because when there have been cases where forests have been cut down for industrial use or for expansion of human living spaces, and then we've lost a lot of vegetation, and now we are looking at it from the water perspective, we are losing a lot of natural purifying agents that are not just purifying the water that we drink, but they are helping us keep the structure of our lands and stopping erosion from further damaging this little space that we already have. So thank you so much for that. And this will bring me to Abiola, because Prof had mentioned something about the importance of keeping the forest of today for the future. And this is what sustainability is all about. Sustainability is about managing the resources that we have now so that we have more for future use. And it doesn't just end with us. And then future generations can also have that and be able to keep reproducing for the next generation as well. So when we are looking at this and we are looking at how best we can ensure that the resources that we have, both in terms of water or in terms of forests, which are both heavily impacted by climate change. Now, the question I have is now, how do we best integrate these sustainable practices, especially with technology, to create resilient water management intervention? And what collaborative efforts do you think we can have to enhance this intervention to increase its impact and its scale?
Thank you so much, Rhoda. And, it's been interesting listening to Professor Saka and Professor Babalola. Like you said, we learn every single day some aspects that are critical to life. I do have a background in urban planning, and there's been a lot of geography in that part of the process. So I appreciate that value. But one thing I wanted to first establish again is, in my response, is that there's no better time than we are in the world right now, where there is a lot of move around the use of technology and the application of technology in every aspect of life. I recall very early on, there was something called ILWIS, similar to GIS, where you basically are able to use, technology and get remote sensing data, and use that remote sensing data to be able to map land use, land cover change, which essentially is allowing you see how land is changing over a period of time. And if you did something like that right now, one of the things you will see with like what Professor Babalola mentioned is that there's a significant aspect of our forest and vegetation cover that has changed over time because of urbanization, urban growth, and just direct use of what man is, us as a people are thinking about in terms of expansion. While on the other side, conversely, when we think about it, the global north is thinking about finding interesting ways of minimizing, the urban growth that they have, because they are trying to find new ways of actually keeping the forest. So, they try to work with us to do a lot of carbon trading, just so that they can swap some of the emissions that they are doing. So, and we have this as natural resources. We have this already as part of our lives. So I think one of the first things, just speaking from a technology perspective, is leveraging exactly the technology that we have. And I wanted to just say this, Professor Saka talked about the establishment of water resource, the Ministry of Water Resources, the work of Ministry of Water Resources, and, all these sub-MDAs. One of the key things that we don't have today, and I want to speak, frankly, from an African perspective, is a registry of the exact capacity that we have that is available and accessible to everybody, of what we have as natural resources across. And I speak from the environmental perspective. So how many mangroves do we have? What is the acreage of mangroves that we have across the continent? What are the most impacted ones? It is not as if the data does not exist, but the data actually exists in the silos. So for instance, Professor Babalola, because he works in that area, might have that data. Somebody that works in the Ministry of Health, as the Ministry of Health, LASEPA in Lagos might have that data for Lagos. Somebody that works in the Niger Delta Ministry might have that data. But the truth about it, that as a nation, as a people that are intentionally trying to actually build an understanding, there is no way for me to access that information and be able to create advocacy for it, even if I'm near the real policymaker that will make the decision around it. There's no way I'll be able to have that data to be able to back up certain policy declarations I have. So from a technology integration point, revolutionize every aspect of life, and is also revolutionizing aspects of and can be used for revolutionizing aspect of water resource management, especially places that are impacted by climate change or vulnerable to climate change impact, as the case may be. So let me give a typical example, and I'll just use some technologies at high level. I started out talking about satellite imaging, GIS, remote sensing, and one of the key things that does for us is that satellite data captures. If you remember, Nigeria had the NICOM Sat 1, 2, and X. And interestingly, that captures data that allows us to be able to see so many things that are going on ground that we would normally be not able to see with our physical eyes. So that then allows us to be able to retrospectively look at what is the weather pattern. We are able to identify water stress regions, provide predictive analytics, for water availability, because automatically you will see the water literally shrink. I remember doing an analysis around a while back on Lake Chad from, GIS mapping, and I could literally see the size of the Lake Chad shrinking, just on a map over the time. And that literally helps government organizations plan really around water resource scarcity, and proactively it changes. It's not something because I'm seeing it now. It's not something they are telling me. It's not an after the fact. So sometimes visualizations coming from this satellite imaging and remote sensing data that is used to inform policies can be very fantastic, or used for academic purpose, used for research purpose, used for building solutions can be very useful. Another interesting one is smart water meters and IoTs. IoTs meaning Internet of Things. In agriculture today, we do a lot of things with irrigation. In domestic use, we use a lot of water for fresh water, just like Professor Saka talked about. And even just measuring rainfall patterns over time. There's available technology from IoT sensors. What is the moisture level of water in the floor? How much water are we? Because there's something like over irrigation, over watering, as it were, which basically creates a loss, both from for the quality of products that we have. So, these devices can provide us, and this technology can provide us, critical big data for water use, leaks, system inefficiencies, and that can allow us, to do rapid interventions because they are real time. They're capturing the data real time. There's almost nowhere today in the country that we don't have some level of 2G technology penetration, as it were. And I use 2G technology penetration, and I'm going to use the example of agriculture. So today, if I was going to provide agricultural extension programs, I will first focus on using SMS, right? And I will tie that with using the radio. So old school is still great school when you are thinking about technology. Before I start talking about IoT and smart technology as well. Another very interesting one with IoT, lately that we know, just slightly lower than satellite imaging and remote sensing, is the use of drones. In healthcare, drones can be used to deliver blood samples, blood platelets, used for drug and commodity delivery. And drones are being used for military maneuvers because they do make things easier, right? So we can actually adopt drones in this instance as well to help us to actually do quite an amount of things. And these two sets of technology, whether from the geospatial technology concept or the smart or IoT technology concept, do two things. They help us gather significant amount of data. And when we gather data, one of the things we then are able to do when we plug this into AI and machine learning is that we're able to translate that data to sense and get patterns that we usually would not have gotten easily. We could do statistical, analysis, a lot of R, around that data, and it helps us do a lot of better water forecast demanding, optimization for distribution, and basically improve efficiencies around the system. So first off, there is already available technology. There's no better time for us to begin to think about using technology that is already available and skill set that is already available for the, for water resource management. But it is about how then we begin to create that digital transformation of saying, we need to find cheaper, easier ways and leverage the opportunities that we have for more data-driven, transparent, and proactive water management approaches for us, especially for communities that are vulnerable, who may not have the capacity to be able to do certain things. But because we now have technology can help us scale quickly, that then gives us that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. Sometimes in the bid for us to advance in technology or advance in innovation, we forget that not everywhere can advance at the same pace. Not everywhere has the infrastructure to actually take us from where we are to where we need to be. And we need to know how to blend and adapt this to what is currently available and use the resources available to push forward the messaging that we need. I remember clearly we had done, HACEY had done a survey in a couple of local communities in Oyo and Osun states, and radio was their preferred method of communication. Internet, all these our smartphones that has 1001 different functionalities and nothing has to do with what we wanted to do, and they didn't understand it. That was not how they were using it. So understanding the use of technology and then tailoring your technology and innovation to fit with the scope and the resources available and the infrastructure, which is very key. infrastructure available is what sometimes is the decider between a successful intervention and something that is just wasting money, no matter how good your intention might have been. And speaking about when you had mentioned the shrinkage of Lake Chad, I remember this clearly. In 2012, when we were at Rio Plus 20 for the conference, United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, the then president had brought this up then on the importance of working on ensuring that Lake Chad does not shrink. It was shrinking then. Over 10 years later, it is still shrinking, and we barely have a strategy to survive if Lake Chad disappears. What are we doing about it? These are discussions that we need to start having, because it is a valuable resource that not just serves Nigeria, it serves two other countries. So we need to start putting discussions like this on the table and designing, co-creating solutions and interventions that are multi-partnered, multi-stakeholder, and multi-addressing, in the sense that it's looking at all aspects of what losing that lake would cause for the country and for the people. And I don't think you could have said it any better than what you've said so far. So thank you so much, Abiola. And this will lead me to my question to you, Professor Saka. Now, we've talked about how integrating technology can help us look at a better scope of sustainable resources and monitoring and managing the available resources that we have. Now, my question now is that how do we even ensure that the integration between such water resource management strategies, initiatives, emergency response initiatives, are able to reduce the negative impacts that will come about if we go into a water crisis or the current climate crisis that we have, and what would successful, effective implementation look like for us as a people?
I didn't understand that.
Hello, Professor Saka, can you hear me? Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can hear you, but I don't
Okay.
know.
Yes, yeah,
As Professor Saka, for me to say, please.
Hello, Professor Saka. Did you hear me?
Dropped on the call.
Prof is still moving. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me too?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay, can you tilt your camera a bit lower so that we can see you clearly as well? Yes, that's better, sir. Yes, sir. All right.
Yeah.
So did you hear the question?
No, at all. I did.
Okay.
Can you come in?
Yes, sir. So I said, how do we ensure the integration between water resource management strategies and initiatives such as public health initiatives are able to reduce the negative impacts of climate change on resources and on health? And what would this look like for it to be implemented effectively?
Oh, thank you. Very good question. From our discussion so far, that we to look at water resource management, the multi-layer, and also a chain from production, distribution, and utilization. And then we also look at the effect of climate itself and even the water that is available, how it's affected the freshwater supply, and then the public health implications. So what can we do? I think the most important is what the last presenter said, is that we need innovative and more technology driven. So when we need all these, the most and first important, because the water problem has affected most vulnerable poor population. So if the vulnerable and poor population are most affected with reduced water supply and fresh water supply. So the first thing that we need is that we must have what we call community involvement and participation. So where we are going to have new technology, and this technology, we must see that technology is something that is adaptable within that local context. Or the community must also be involved in what we want to do. Let me cite an example in a survey and an assessment that we carry out one in the northern part of the country. Okay, the community developed, I was able to build a hospital, health facility. The community were also able to also put in place appropriate human resources for that health facility. And then of course, other community able to build also latrine for the utilization of water. But however, the water is not there. So with community involvement and the new technology, the community will be able to tell you that, okay, this is where we need, and then this is how it to be. And then so that even when the water is being installed, community will be able to see it being able to use it as a user-friendly technology. So that's one of the most important things. Okay, like I also told about what WHO and World Bank talked about in terms of the situation of water in the next 10 or 20 years to come. That's where we're going to have more mortality, more morbidity, and more epidemics from lack of fresh water. That is already coming. Zika disease is already coming in. And then other epidemics are already coming in because of poor water supply. So therefore, in a country like ours in Nigeria, what we need most and first is to review our policy. The policy as implemented even on the water now is like 2016 policy on water. So we need to review and then review the policy to be aligned with the modern situation in the country. And then in view of that too, if the policy is being reviewed, the Act that also established institution that manage water resources in Nigeria need to also to be amended. For instance, in water resource management in the country, like I told you, started as a multi-layer that is from federal level. Okay, and the Federal Ministry of Water Resources and other agencies. Okay, so if you have all these agencies, okay, the agencies, are they located or situated where they need to be? Okay, look at the let's say the example of Basin's water. Okay, we have lower and upper one. Okay, are they actually getting to the grassroots? So these are what we need. So the institution, and then apart from that, the institution too. Okay, all the other people that are also involved, the incentive for those who need to work, those who need to also involve with the management of water resources. More importantly too, if you have all this chain, then we have even from coming in from production, from distribution of water, and then from the utilization. How is it being utilized? So this is in conglomeration of, we need what you call multi-partner. Okay, we are in the university yesterday. I was discussing with the head of the Department of Geophysics. And then we are looking at the Department of Geophysics was able to tell me that, okay, even in the production of water, there's a new technology. So I was asking that, and I asked her, what is geophysics has to do with all the things? So you see, in the water, so to solve water problem, we need professional involvement. Not only professional involvement, we need also to collaborate. We need to bring down the money. The World Bank is there. They are ready, and every time they are ready to also, once you have your innovation and an idea, that will also bring the solution, especially in terms of water, and the UNICEF, they are all there. So we need more collaboration, more partnership. And these are shots, brief of what we need to also use the impact of climate change and the impact of poor water, low water supply to our population. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I was really struck by when you said you spoke with a colleague in geophysics. In my head, I was like, what has geophysics got to do with what we are talking about right now? And then you explained it. Everybody really has a role to play in ensuring that our resources are managed properly. Abiola had also mentioned the use of satellites and geomapping to watch what was going on and how our resources were faring. And it is this realization that we need to leverage on so that we have more partners, more key stakeholders across the different sectors working together to ensure that the resources that we have, the water that we have is properly managed, and it can last, the quality is maintained, and it can last us for a very, very long time. Thank you so much, Professor Saka. I'll move on to Professor Babalola. And as Professor Saka had said, or had shared, you will need that multi-stakeholder, multi-sectorial coming in to ensure that we are able to manage our resources properly. We need policies that work, and that policies that work for today and can work for tomorrow. So looking at this, we can also assume and infer that water not only affects is not just about water in itself, but it affects every other aspect of life, from health to agriculture to economy in itself as well, because resource management also has to do with economic development. Now, what strategies do you think that we can recommend that would sustainably help us manage the resources that we have, especially when you look at it in terms of water management, forestry, and agriculture, because agriculture depends a lot on water management?
Oh, thank you very much for this question. And before I go into this, let us first understand one thing again. With respect to forestry, and let's try to understand. I don't know my audio, and I've tried to increase it. Let's try to understand the connection of forests, trees, and climate change. Okay? From a simple elementary and photosynthesis, I'll go back to that again. No, in photosynthesis, in food production, we have removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is one of those gases that contribute to what we call greenhouse gases. And in greenhouse gases, these are some of these things that we call the emissions, the gases that are being emitted from different anthropogenic activities, different production, even of our industry, we release carbon into the atmosphere. All right. Doing an agricultural production, we release other gases like methane in animal production and all that. We release all these gases and they contribute to what we call greenhouse gases and affect climate. Okay. And all these gases, we must find a way to remove them from the atmosphere if we need to actually tackle climate change. Okay. Now, one of those things actually really one of those substances, let me call them living creature that can really remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere are the trees, our vegetation. In the process of producing their own fruit, they remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, they give us oxygen and also give up the water vapor. All these things, they all contributing to all cycles we have in the atmosphere, the hydrological cycle, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, all different cycles sustain our lives. Okay. Now, when we have increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is what is contributing to all this changing in the atmospheric atmospheric activity. And it also leads to what we call increasing global warming. And when we have increasing global warming, as we increase in the temperature, we have all these disturbances in the hydrological processes. We have melting of the iceberg at the atmosphere and at the hemisphere. And when there's increase in all this water volume in the ocean, all our coastal communities, coastal cities will be experiencing flooding and other natural phenomena which are negative to our existence and sustenance on Earth. Now, let's come back to the question. What are some of those things that really lead to disturbance or removal of vegetation or trees in our environment? Forestation. Overgrazing. You know, grazing right now is not just about grazing on the grasses. Even some people even cut down trees in order to feed their animals. All these activities and organic activities contribute to what we have as deforestation. When we have deforestation, then we have decrease in the substance that are supposed to have removed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And it is going to affect rainfall, is going to affect vegetation, is going to affect availability, is going to affect quality of water for us and all that. Now, what is the solution? Yes, we know we must cut down trees in order to farm, right? Trees that are in forestry, that are in environment, that are in ecosystem, we normally frown at the rate at which our farmers are cutting down trees, process of producing food in our food production process. Yes, we have to eat. Yes, we have to produce. But how do we go about it? That we will take out the vegetation to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We are introducing agroforestry. You can plant trees as you are planting your agronomic. If you look at some of our elementary agricultural science, normally tell you can plant trees trees. Even now in the cities, we are proposing what we call urban forestry. Trees in urban area, green spaces in our environment. They say, yes, you have to build housing. Then you should build housing. But you know, no. You must continue. We need roads. We need to construct roads. We need airports. We need field. We need even stadium. We need all this infrastructure. But at the same time, after all this infrastructure, introduce trees in the environment. Introduce trees in the city. It's what we call open forestry, green spaces. Even now we have green buildings. All this they help us at our nation level. All this they help us in regulating all this regulating regulating precipitation, regulating rainfall. And all these things they help with availability of water and even our livelihood. So trees have a very important role in precipitation, in the water availability, and the quality of water. Now, another thing that I want to do is now is enough that all these anthropogenic activities that leads to tree removal. Even our so-called open grazing is not helping matter. I'm currently attending a conference in Nairobi, Kenya now, and we're having a discussion on how can we mitigate climate. And so somebody is proposing ranching for even our animals. We have been talking about ranching rather than open process, open grazing. Because our and we can always feed them with the necessary food while we are producing our livestock. So in the agricultural process, in our animal consumption, let us have ranching, feed them inside. Then we can manage our vegetation, we can manage our forest, we can manage our trees, we can all better open activity, we have man-made forest, which are the plantations, open forestry, and all these activities. So these are some of the things that we need to consider in order to make sure that we manage our trees, we manage our environment, and strategies that we can use to conserve our water, make water available to all of us. Let me just pause there while we continue the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And as I said before, I'm always learning something new. I remember in university then when they said Krebs cycle, I hated anything. Once you put cycle in that sentence, oh no, you've killed me. But now we are understanding the importance of all these cycles that help us in managing the resources that we have, and the water cycle, the cycle of clean air, clean energy that we have in our societies. And of course, you couldn't have said it better with the importance of greening our cities. We can't just keep having tokenistic lawns in the middle of highways and say that we are making the city. It does. I till now I don't understand the concept of, because I can't call those things gardens and I can't call them a symbol of reducing the carbon dioxide in our cities. They are just packs of green lawns, and we need to be more intentional. A couple of years ago, we had done a lot of projects planting trees. I think in Lagos planted, there was a time they were planting about 10,000 trees at once. And then all of a sudden, initiatives like that fell to the wayside. People stopped planting trees. People stopped talking about trees. And as such, people stopped talking about the importance of trees and how trees affects the production of clean air, clean water, and cool environments. Now it is so hot, you can barely think about what you need to do for the next couple of hours because of how hot it is. So we need to start pushing this commitment and pushing these discussions out there again. And as you said, it's not something that we can separate from policies that work. We need to start thinking about how do all our actions, our individual actions, such as open grazing that we might think is solving another problem, are currently affecting one issue that we are currently facing that is contributing to the disaster of climate change. Thank you so much, Professor Babalola. I'll come to you now, Abiola. And I think as Prof has said, we need to start coming together. Both profs have elaborated on the importance of actually bringing people together to think about ideas and solutions that can work. Now, with sustainability again at the center of this, now, what do you think would be collaborative approaches across these different sectors, across the sector of agriculture, across public health, across environmental management, across economy, that what approaches are proving most effective in addressing our water security challenges, that especially those that are brought about by this incessant climate change, and how do we link this again to technology? And I say technology, not just all aspects of technology and all levels of technology, because I don't want us to start just talking about satellites that half of the people have never even seen, but things that we can actually deploy in our resource setting. And please, if you have any questions, kindly put them in the chat box. Immediately after this panel discussions, we'll take some of the questions there and we'll read them out before we round up the webinar in the next, I think we have 15 minutes left now. Okay, so over to you, Abiola.
Just quickly, the way I would say, I would just respond to that is, we need to basically use a system-based, locally relevant approach to addressing the integration of technology, like you rightly mentioned earlier, and basically collaboration, because the truth about it is that if I bring a system or an approach that worked in France or that worked in Australia and I just try to superimpose it in, Igboho, in your state, I am just literally joking. So integrating sustainable practices with technology requires that, system-based, locally relevant, contextually relevant approach that would, basically connect efficiency and environmental conservation. So let me make a typical example. The adoption of, things like climate smart agriculture. We talked about radio essentially helping, and just similar to what Prof was talking about, Professor Babalaola was talking about in terms of the requirement and understanding of the circles and how critical those are, combined with digital tools that can optimize water used in farming, can help change the narrative. I already know, for instance, and I am giving an example as a farmer, that this year there might be delayed rains. So there should be a response to that because I now have an understanding of it. I won't go ahead and try to make a plant. Rhoda, you rightly mentioned in terms of, tree planting, right? Just basically sharing data, just letting me see data around what that is doing within the urban center kind of begins to change the narrative. So first off is that concept of us then using the right technology as a system approach around it. And I'll break down a little further in a bit. So there's something called precision irrigation systems, powered, and I'm using technology as a benchmark, powered by IoT that can reduce water by 20 to 40%, actually. Now we have urban farms where it's led by hydroponics, right? So it then means that because we're in a concrete jungle, urban farming should something we should begin to think about, apart from the fact that, we don't, we're not as much paying attention to soil-based farming. So it means that because we do have potential for land, right, across Africa and across Nigeria, while we're thinking about, improving our ability for soil farming, we then can embrace technology for hydroponics and the rest of them as well in our urban centers to begin to address the issue of food insecurity and reduce also the concept of water exploitation. And the interesting part of it is that, we have so much runoff water from all of this interesting urban infrastructure. When rain falls, it falls on the buildings and it runs off, just goes into the drainage. How can we redirect what we could call runoff? To be able to begin to use them as urban agricultural resources. So it's waste because it looks like rainwater, but how can we then transform them to, urban agricultural potentials, for instance? A typical example I've seen and I'm very familiar with is drip irrigation technology used in India from just basically that has improved crop yield by 30%. And some of them are used in urban centers, right? While reducing water consumption, because it is drip irrigation farming, by 50%, right? Which would have been runoff water from flooding, but now you've basically found a new use from it, right? Another key thing around it is one, and I spoke to it when I was talking earlier, is the issue of the fact that we have a lot of data, but those data sets are actually siloed, right? So people don't share data. That's something I've learned a lot in Africa. We don't like sharing data. We don't, create interoperability platforms for us to share data. The government, private sector, community-based organizations, potentially individually have capacity to scale solutions, but cannot scale those solutions in of themselves because there's data they don't have. So there needs to be seen that trust, right? Maybe before I talk about data sharing, there needs to be that trust that we're collaborative. There's an African agenda. There's a national agenda for food security. There's a national agenda for sustainability to say I must be able to ensure the forest that I'm enjoying today is able to cater for my children in the near future. There needs to be a deliberate attempt at wanting to work together, not looking at the other person as potentially exploiting the circumstance, as it were. Something we've not really used within the environmental space is the concept of public-private partnerships in using to drive successful water management projects. So when you think about water management, many times, just like Professor Saka alluded to, it's vested within the government, right? And it means that government has to spend a lot of money. And he mentioned the AFDB. The government has to spend a lot of money around, providing the infrastructure for water cleaning, water harvesting, distribution of water systems. But I just want us to tangentially look at what happened with technology, particular information technology in Nigeria, as a case example, how we were able to get GSM to function critically, leveraging private sector partnership in that area, right? It then means that there might be resources and competencies that already exist within the private sector. I am very aware that, for instance, the NSBP, which is the Nigerian Sustainability Banking Principles, that is resident within the CBN, mandates or recommends that financial institutions should actually put about 2% of their gross profit into CSR. How are we leveraging something like that to be able to say, how can the private sector use that investment to drive, they already have the money, they already are generating the revenue. How can we use them to drive certain investments that could potentially yield, right? Because right now we're already saying there's limited water. If we meter the water already, it then means that people would always pay for it. We're already paying for telecoms, but it can be subsidized because there's now a way to minimize it. Government doesn't then have to go out of pocket to manage it. I do know, for instance, from CSR financing or for climate financing, there's been a lot of investment in forest and forest regeneration and forest conservation. For instance, I do know that the NTF actually is a collective where a lot of and I'm using financial institutions because we know they hold the money, where they put a lot of money into the NTF, right? So the National Conservation Foundation. So it tells you already that there are some mechanisms. The thing about it is, how do we then use that public-private partnership to drive growth for ourselves? In Lagos, for instance, many estates are already having their infrastructure charges being paid for by the residents, as it were, to get water, to get electricity. So we can't really think outside the box. We already have small models that are functional in that way. A model that works really well in Africa for something like this, the water and sanitation program in Kenya, that has involved local communities in wastewater management decision. And one key thing that I like around it is that, it has provided and improved access to over 2 million people, while promoting sustainability practices. And basically what they just did was participatory planning and simple things. I just used the base map, and I looked at the base map and I started talking to people about it. And, private sector came into it, because the truth about it is that if people are hungry and angry, and there's a conversation about the scarcity of resources and how it is affecting climate crisis. Every time there is a struggle for resources, what happens is that there's conflicts. And that's exactly the reason why you have a lot of, conflict. They are connected to natural resources. They are connected to the fact of, climate change and climate stress. So when you begin to look at, inequalities, whether climate justice, you begin to think about all of these things trigger, climate crisis, as the case may be. So for that, then there's that key aspect of, and I will end on the conversation that I started earlier on the idea of data sharing. Right? Once I have trust, once we can understand that, technicality can be in another sector that I don't have, or I can borrow technicality because we are a collective, we have a collective agenda, we are working towards a goal, data sharing becomes easy, right? And I'll use an analogy within the healthcare space or health intervention space. There's something called the One Health approach. The One Health approach talks about the idea of, agriculture, healthcare, environment, talking together and sharing data to be able to address the issue of pandemics or epidemic preparedness and response. That approach essentially allows everybody to say, I do have my technical areas, but I'm able to work with you and allow you to be able to see the data I have so that I can make the comprehensive collective decision to actually move things a lot faster. So there should be that approach that allows us to remove or stop thinking in silos and start sharing data with one another. The agricultural expert should be able to share data with the government experts. Yes, there are agricultural experts in government. The private sector person that has money and understands economics, right? Because today I can raise money for green bonds on the stock exchange. That tells you a lot about how you can then, but you're not a financial expert. So you may not be able to get the green bond. Now, a development expert knows about climate financing and can basically go to create DLIs, development linked indicators that are impact investors, right? That can bring money into the country as regard that. So, but that will come only from the base of where we have trust, we are sharing data, right? So that data-driven collaborative can enhance the impact, begin to change the narrative that we have, and all the technological components will begin to fall into place, right? Technology is always there. What technology is an enabler. It's not necessarily the solution to the problem. It enables you to achieve your goal. And if you don't have a great goal, technology will also, magnify your gaps as well. That's what technology really does. So for me, I believe that just thinking and stepping away from the concept of me to the concept of we as a collaborative, leveraging, the current technology frameworks that we already have and saying, I might have capacity in another sector that I'm not speaking to. Community-based organizations are very important. They understand what is going on in their communities. Civil society organizations understand the structure of society in a way we may not even see government see. They are also able to attract some certain kind of funds. Private sector organizations have a lot of competence and government understands that regulatory framework. So that collaborative will create that framework for us to be able to, try things like PPPs, try things like government-led programs, community-led programs, but with the right data sharing platform, with the right trust, and then we can then bring technology into that conversation. Let me hand over back to you, Rhoda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I you've said so much. I don't even know where to start from in picking my summary. And I think one of the things I like most about what you said is the role of technology, because a lot of people think technology is the solution. Technology makes your solution achievable. Technology makes your solution scalable. Technology makes the impact of your solution wider. But technology, most of the time, especially in situations or in countries that have strain on their resources, technology is an enabler. So when we start looking at it in that perspective, that what is our solution? How can technology make it better? It will be easier for us to design solutions that work for us and then can be scaled to other regions as well. And Abiola had also mentioned and explained about the One Health approach. And this is something that at HACEY, we are also working on and implementing at different points and different spaces. And I just want to say that when you look at approaches and strategies such as One Health, a lot of times we think that it is a government level thing. It doesn't have to be a government level thing. Our One Health program is working directly with young people and is sharing information, sharing data between young persons in Nigeria, with young persons in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Guinea, in different places in Africa, because we understand that data cannot remain in one place. For data to work for you, data has to be shared, and keeping it to yourself is like keeping your money in your pocket and expecting to eat good food. What are you going to use to get to that good food? So that is just a simple analogy of you pushing out data and sharing that data so you are able to learn and people can learn for you, and then you can adapt your programs, adapt your strategies to suit better to future to how change is happening within your development space. Thank you so much, Abiola. Because we've run out of time, I won't be able to take the other questions that we've had for this very, very engaging and very, very enlightening discussion. So we'll just round up with our final thoughts on where we see when we look ahead, when we look at the future of sustainable water resource management, especially in the context of climate resilience and community well-being, especially looking at it from different global discussions that are happening, such as at the UN level, at the climate change conference level, at sustainable management conference levels, and even within our locale, in our federal governments, our state governments, and within our various estate groups. How do we see where we are going to be headed, and what key recommendations can we have or give to our stakeholders, especially our policymaker? Professor Saka had mentioned about having policies that work and policies that are changing structure and infrastructure for the better. What do we want to say to our policymakers? What do we want to say to our private sector partners? What do we want to say to our communities of what we should do to ensure that we are able to better manage our water resources? I'll start with Professor Saka, and then we'll go to Professor Babalola, and then Abiola, you can round it up for us. We can't hear you, Professor Saka. You're on mute.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Coming from
And your camera down as well.
Is it okay?
Yes, it's perfect now.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Probably from the point of Babalola, I think he has extensively discussed, most importantly, private sector engagement. What the discussion was going on, I just thought about that. Okay, just like we have universities, we are with a federal government dominated in the past. Now we have private university. Is it not possible for our government to give a leeway for the private sector, private involvement and engagement in this, so that at least we have what we call sustainable water supply to our people? I think that's one point. And the other thing that is, okay, when we have put in place policy structure, I think we also need to involve the young idea, brilliant idea, those that are exposed and now skill and experience. I think those young ones that are also talented, that are also ready to work, ready to also sacrifice their time and energy. And these are people that we expect to man and put in place appropriate management of water. So those young ones with skill and experiences are able to look at the issue of climate change, issue of collaboration, and then getting it done. I've already mentioned involvement of our community, involvement of our young people, involvement of community and people at a low level. And there's also importantly that where we are discussing issue of technology, where we're discussing issue of production and distribution of water, we should not forget creating awareness too. Okay, creating awareness that because okay, we are talking at high-tech level now, that okay, climatic changes, we're talking at high-tech level of issue of water. Those one in the community, they don't know what is even climatic changes, right? All they are after is that they need water to drink, they need water for their domestics, they need water in industry. I think we need to create more awareness, and I believe that this discussion interaction we have is also a form of awareness creation. And then but those awareness creation must also get down to the grassroots. Let us also not forget issue of know-how. Even when we are creating and when we are talking about creating awareness, the awareness I'm talking about, even though I talked about the vulnerable, the low, the illiterate, the awareness, even those people that matter most, people even at the realms of affair, okay, at the government level, there may be an assumption that, okay, what you do need is fund, but actually the increment of this impact of climate, so the awareness also need to get to those levels. And I think also too, just like we have a discussion of forest effect of an agriculture, effect of other aspects, and we talked about even one health issue. So we can now see that issue of water is not just one sector. It's not an issue that we have to talk about. But it's not an issue for doctors. It's not an issue for an engineering alone. It's also for so many sectors that must be involved. Without taking much of that, I think as we stop now, as other speaker to also make their point and comments.
Thank you so much, Professor Saka. Professor Babalola.
Okay, thank you so much once again for giving me the platform. Now, as we are rounding off, I just want to quickly bring in 1 or 2 points on what we really need to do. You know, from the beginning, I've been coming from the point of the environmentalists and ecologists and somebody who's into environmental protection, which has to do with directly on water option. Okay. From all these things we're talking about, number one, I want to talk about those watershed, those vegetation that we have along the water body. We need to create what I will call buffer zones. There should be a limitation to where we can harvest forests or where we can fell trees along our water body. Because all these forests are the ones that we really protect the water body, that will help us in filter the water in order to help us in water precipitation, control water, even pollution from getting into water, help us to control the rate at which siltation occur in our water body, and will make water available to every one of us. So we need to implement buffer zones along these water bodies. If all these trees are already gone, let us find a way to plant them back. Okay, we need to carry out afforestation along our water bodies in order to make sure that we control the rate at which we are losing our water bodies. Number two, I want us to balance our forest conservation and agricultural productivity. We're not saying we should not produce fruit. We're not saying we should not clear land. But in order to make sure that we control the rate at which we are removing vegetation, and we are increasing our carbon emission, and we are contributing to climate change, and we are contributing to global warming, we need to find a way in order to balance what is our production. Okay, you clear land, find a way to plant back your trees. Let's recommend to people in the city, let us find a way to plant trees. You know, I've been mentioning tree, or forest, because this thing will contribute to the drought that we are talking about. We have climate change to the extreme. We have drought, and it is the drought as a result of what? It's as a result of causing disbalance at the rate that we are supposed to have rainfall. But when the vegetation is gone and we have climate issue, even when rain is supposed to fall, we won't have rain. And when we have reduction in rain, our rivers dried up. Even in the place that I live in Ilorin, there will be a time when you won't have water in your well. Well will dry up. Now everybody is sinking borehole because you are going deeper and deeper in to get water to drink and to have water as, for our domestic activities at home. So we have issue of water scarcity due to climate change, and one of the solutions to climate change is our vegetation. Okay. Another thing is, let us formulate policy to reduce emission. Policy. Somebody just up in the chat now. He mentioned methane. Methane is even dangerous than carbon dioxide. Methane contributes more to global warming than carbon dioxide. So let us regulate. We need to formulate policy that will regulate our emission. Let us have emission targets, emission reduction targets everywhere in the world. They are formulating emission target level. Everyone, some people are formulating how they can reduce their fossil fuel, how they can reduce cars, automobile using fossil fuel, go for electric. Let us formulate policies that will target emission reduction. And let us embark on tree planting, and I've said, I will continue to say that in our city, in our urban area, and another. And lastly, let our infrastructure be green infrastructure, environmentally friendly infrastructures. Our building, let us find a way to reduce the rate at which we are consuming energy. So when our buildings are green, our infrastructures are green, then we are going to reduce the rate at which we are consuming energy and the rate at which we are emitting our emissions. These are all what we need to do at our own micro level, at individual level, and let me add this. Please have gardens in your home. When you have gardens in your home, at least you are personally and directly contributing to carbon removal from the atmosphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Babalola. And I like the garden part, although I tell people I have the blackest thumb. Nothing ever grows in my hand, but I will not stop. I will keep trying. Oshuni, Abiola.
Wow. So it's one of and I would say it this way. One of the easiest ways sometimes to solve problems is just getting people to understand that a problem exists. In most cases, some of the solutions to the problem already exist with the people. And I would use a critical aspect of, just learning from sustainable development and climate change. Many times when you think about climate adaptation and climate mitigation, especially on the African continent, there are already approaches that existed in the times of our fathers that have been passed down through stories, folklores, but we've lost them, right? And that speaks to the issue of data and recall. There are approaches to climate agriculture, there are approaches to like what Professor Babalola was talking about, the issue of planting, and I would just extend this to things like even school farms. If you remember, in the 70s, 80s, every school had a farm. I don't know what happened in the 90s and the 2000s anymore, whether schools even had farms anymore. As the case may be. So if you begin to think about that, you then begin to really understand that if I did agric and I was part of planting, it would be natural for me to have a garden at home, right? The British people embraced the concept of gardening as a way to manage their air pollution, carbon monoxide air pollution from industrialization. Till today, because it has become a national culture, you find almost every home or homestead having a garden that has flowers in it, right? Apart from the trees. And so for, beyond beautification, for the goodness of life. And when you begin to think about the quality of life that you have, in urban planning, when you think about quality of life, you think about air quality, right? Air quality connects, like Professor Babalola and Professor Sakaz alluded to both public health and, forestry, because the quality of air you do is dependent on the quality of plants and forests that are around you, right? And the beauty of it is that life has shown that a single man can grow a forest because the man has been intentional. So it just means that I can decide, from hearing the stories of my grandfathers and great-grandfathers of the kind of forest that have been around the place and decide to start growing the forest. Examples exist of people that have grown forests by themselves. So imagine if we all decided to grow our own forests. And I'm saying this very intentionally to say that we can definitely bring back those indigenous strategies, those approaches that we know from the stories, and then really begin to grow them. Because it then means that, the conversations, I was listening to a lot of conversations around how Kenya is creating regulation to say that you must actually be taxed for, growing seeds, planting trees if you really want to, because there's a real move for GMO and the conversation. So there's a lot of controversy around that, but that's not really the case. But what I'm really saying is, how do we then as a people also begin to grow our indigenous approaches and practices and our local knowledge, especially around climate adaptation, especially around sustainability within, the space, right? So that's very important. That's something I wanted to basically emphasize. The second thing is that because we already know today that our young people are, Gen Alphas, Gen Zs, relate to messaging in a different way, right? We need to then adapt the messaging that we are giving to those Gen Alphas and Gen Zs. For instance, you find out that young people do a lot of gamification. We can't just try to absolve ourselves of how the realities of our times are. They grew up in the age where, mobile devices are an extension of their life. So we need to begin to say, how can I create something or bring technology that allows that young person to be able to connect to sustainability and agriculture, as it were, and then make themselves feel proud of it. So let me give you a typical example. Today, there is things like I can measure the number of steps I take, and I can set personal goals for myself, right, on the number of steps I take every day. That's gamification of good health. If you gamify it for a young person that they need to just plant trees around themselves, and they will basically you create a sort of personal incentive for them. You'll be shocked at the amount of people that will begin to plant trees in of themselves by themselves, because now there's a gamification, because they'll say, oh, I'm the person with the highest tree planted across Africa. It will just create some change of buzz, because there's something on the inside of every human that wants to achieve greatness. But you basically tapped into that understanding and leverage technology that is available to them to do it. So what I'm saying in the real sense that we need to then think about the audience that we have right now. We can't use the old approaches alone, but we need to think about how to bring those old approaches, storifying them. I grew up watching certain kind of cartoons, and, there was something called Tales by Moonlight, at those times. How do we bring those interesting conversations into the new life, the young new life of people that can bring those, interesting stories of the Iroko? If there's no Iroko, it doesn't exist anymore. Olurombi and the rest of them. I'm just using those interesting stories to be able to talk about how we kind of have subconsciously planted the ideas of agriculture, forestry into people, because those things are able to make you think about it and help you. So let's look for let me say African-made strategies, African-led, African approaches to helping us address some of these, challenges that we have, as it were, so that we can then really say, we don't rely so much only on external approaches, but they are homegrown, they are easily sustained, and then we feel a sense of ownership for it as a people. Thank you very much, Rhoda, and I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Abiola. I really appreciate your contribution. As I said, anybody can plant a tree. It's not hard. The minimum you need for a forest is, I think, 150 trees on an acre, or about 300 trees on an acre. Just look at it. An acre is 5 plots of land. A plot of land, a Lagos plot of land now is 50 by 100. So calculate that and see, in your lifetime, you can actually plant a forest. So let's make that a personal goal. If you have a piece of land, if you have space that you can use, keep on planting trees. When you get to 300, say, okay, I've planted a forest. And you can have a forest named after you as your children's inheritance. So on this note, I want to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, Professor Saka. Thank you, Professor Babalola. Thank you, Abiola, for the wonderful recommendations that you have given. Privatization of to make water supply sustainable, community engagement and awareness creation, technical capacity building, prioritizing a balance of production and regeneration activities, adopting green infrastructures, all these wonderful, wonderful recommendations. I hope that we can all adapt it and adopt it, because these are the small steps that we need to take for us to really truly create a sustainable future for all. That when the next generation comes, and 2 generations, 5 generations, 10 years in the future, they have something that they are going to work with at the end of the day, and they are also managing. Thank you so, so much, Professor Olatunji, the director of the Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development, for working with us in putting this together. We truly appreciate your enthusiasm and your dedication to ensuring that we are able to have the knowledge, and we're able to have the discussion and bring this knowledge to everyone out there. We do hope that this is not going to be the last session. This discussion is going to carry forward, and we are going to have many more such partnerships. Partnership is not just public-private, it's individual as well. So please make connections, ensure that you keep this discussion going so that we have a future that we can be proud of. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Job.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Professor Olatunji, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining despite the short notice.
Oh, yeah, most welcome, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rhoda, too. We need to
Rhoda,
appreciate you for
Thank you,
excellent
such a
contribution.
thank you so much. It was truly a pleasure, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Adela. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shaka.